By the early 1920s, Americans were tiring of crusades. They were tired of trying to make the world safe for democracy. And at home, progressivism, which attempted to improve the quality of life for all citizens, was wearing thin. The nation joined President Warren G. Harding in what he called a return to normalcy and the good life made possible by a surging economy. It was the jazz age, the roaring 20s, a decade in which the old belief in hard work, thrift, and personal restraint seemed to be crumbling beneath an onslaught of movie madness, jazz babies, and bootleg gin. Prosperity spawned a new mass consumer culture based around spending, leisure, and fun. During the 1920s, Americans enjoyed the highest standard of living in the world. Spurred by new inventions and technological innovations, the United States economy was in the midst of a third industrial revolution. The shift from coal to electricity helped double worker productivity. A wave of mergers created new production giants, run by men who paid as much attention to research, marketing, and advertising as to manufacturing itself. What the country's industries made was also changing, as production shifted from things like steel and oil to goods and services manufactured directly for consumers. Electrical appliances, radios, furnishings, motion pictures, and especially automobiles. To realize his dream of making a car for everyone, Henry Ford pioneered a moving assembly line that sped up work, saved costs, and cut the time it took to make a car from more than 12 to under 2 hours. Henry produced the Model T, reliable, affordable, each one just like the other, and you could get it in any color you wanted, as long as it was black. In 1914, Henry started to pay his workers the unheard-of wage of $5 a day. His friends thought him mad, but higher wages were good for business.
You had created a system which had mass production, where people stood on an assembly line and did over and over the same job. It made people discontent. And there was a lot of labor turnover at Ford. And one of the ways in which Ford wanted to guarantee a predictable labor force, that people would stay and that you could count on them coming every day, was to raise wages. And so to pay his workers considerably above other firms, that people would not only be able to buy Fords, but other products at the time.
Across America, companies raised workers' wages to increase their buying power. They also improved workers' benefits, offering old age pensions, paid vacations, and insurance. Still, few Americans could afford to buy an auto outright, so automobile makers pioneered another innovation, buying on credit. In the old days, you bought only what you could afford. In modern America, buy now, pay later was becoming a way of life. The next step forward came from General Motors boss Alfred Sloan, who recognized that cars could be sold on the basis of comfort and style as well as price. Applying the laws of Paris dressmakers to the automobile industry, GM introduced a wide range of differently priced cars, which they changed every year. Keep the consumer dissatisfied, Sloan decided, and therefore eager to buy a newer and fancier model. By 1930, Americans owned 8 out of 10 of all the world's automobiles. The automobile accelerated America's shift from a rural to an urban nation. By 1920, for the first time in history, more Americans lived in cities than in the countryside. Drawn by job and the desire for a better life, 6 million more people moved to urban areas during the decade. Symbols of American prosperity and ingenuity, cities built new stores, theaters, and skyscrapers. Suburbs boomed too, as growing numbers of white-collar workers used autos, streetcars, and trains to commute between office and home.
When you really do begin to build a society around the automobile, it will allow people to live outside central cities in a much greater degree. It's the central contributing factor to the expansion of the suburbs, which is really 19th century cities and early 20th century cities. Only the very wealthy lived in the suburbs. And provided you have the money to make it all happen, the automobile allows the city to expand much wider into the suburbs and to minimize public transportation. It heightens people's desire to have a private mode of transportation and a private lifestyle in the suburbs.
The automobile in the 1920s changes almost every aspect of American life. The whole landscape begins to change. Small-town grocery stores, for example, often closed up because people could hop into their car and drive to a bigger city nearby. And many people thought that the car was anti-religious because a lot of people, instead of going to church on Sunday, went for a Sunday drive. The car changed the nature of dating habits. For the first time, young people could escape the chaperonage of their parents. The car also led to drive-in movies and then eventually drive-in banks. And so it's hard to overestimate what the car did to American habits in a whole variety of ways.
Cities were the centers of the new mass consumer culture, the proving grounds of new forms of entertainment and leisure. To create a consumer out of a citizen required profound changes in people's values and behaviors. And the segment of the nation's society that changed the most were women. Women's lives were changing fast. In 1920, the 19th Amendment had guaranteed women the right to vote. More women than ever before held paying jobs.
In the 1920s, young women in particular enjoyed more freedom than young women had ever had before. Women were going to high school in increasing numbers, and many of them were graduating from high school. Women were also going to college in increasing numbers, and they were going to coeducational colleges. They were living away from their families. They were dating. They were engaged in sports activities to an extent that women had never been engaged in sports activities before. They were increasingly throwing off the restraints of an earlier generation. They wore looser clothing instead of being tightly constrained by corsets the way women had been constrained in the 19th century. They cut their hair, they went to speakeasies, they drank bathtub gin, and this is the image we have of the 1920s. We call these young women the flappers.
Inside the home, another kind of revolution was taking place.
The 20s were a period when not only the automobile changed things, but a lot of other breakthroughs came along. Electricity was one of them. The country got electrified during that time. Of course, you have to realize that a large number of people didn't profit from electricity. The farmer, for example, didn't get electricity in many cases until the end of the 1930s. Electricity enabled you to buy all kinds of appliances, toasters, electric stoves. Just having an electric light meant a great deal.
New household appliances were reducing the drudgery of laundry, food preparation, and cleaning. That didn't mean that women spent any less time doing housework, but the nature of their work was changing. For now, they had to make smart choices from the wealth of new home consumer products. By then, too, manufacturers knew that it was no longer men, but women